Have you ever looked at a company, one that seems totally dominant in its field, and wondered, how did they even get there?
Right.
And maybe even more interesting, what could possibly make that dominance shift or even start to waver?
Yeah, it's a great question.
Today, we're going deep on Samsung's pretty remarkable and sometimes, well, challenging journey in the smartphone market.
Hmm.
We'll trace its path from being a leader to where it stands now, its current kind of evolving position.
Hmm.
And our guide for this exploration is this really insightful article called How Samsung Lost the Smartphone War.
And what this deep dive, I think, will show you is that it's really much more than just a tech story about phones.
Okay.
It's a compelling case study in business strategy.
Mm-hmm.
It reveals these pivotal turning points and often the surprising forces that actually shape them.
Right.
We're going to try and help you spot the underlying patterns, lessons that go way beyond just the smartphone industry. They really apply to almost any brand navigating a fiercely competitive landscape.
So to really get Samsung's present, we kind of have to rewind a bit, don't we?
Absolutely.
I mean, this wasn't a company that just stumbled into smartphones.
Not at all.
Samsung had a huge head start in electronics. They were building car phones way back in the 1980s.
Yeah, I remember those.
And they evolved into this tech hardware powerhouse by the early 2000s. They were already making critical parts for other big players.
Mm-hmm.
It gave them this almost unfair foundation, you could say.
It really did. And it's crucial to remember that when Apple unveiled the original iPhone back in 2007, the tech world had a really mixed reaction.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
A lot of people, especially the established players, they famously dismissed it. They scoffed at, no physical keyboard, the high price.
Right.
But Samsung, and this is unique, they didn't follow the crowd. They paid extremely close attention.
Interesting.
Their first move wasn't to just rush out some clumsy competitor. It was to observe, to learn. And that strategic patience that really set the stage for their early success.
And you can see how that deliberate approach really paid off then.
Totally.
Because while some rivals kind of panicked, rushed out these clunky, buggy touchscreen phones, Samsung took its time. They learned from those early mistakes, refined their strategy, and then, boom, 2010, they launched the first Galaxy S.
Right.
And it wasn't just another Android phone, was it? It landed as this remarkably well-rounded device, fantastic display, impressive performance for the time.
And their competitive edge, to your point, it was formidable precisely because it was built on those existing strengths.
Okay.
Samsung leveraged its deep expertise in display tech, particularly OLED and AMOLED screens.
Oh, yeah, those vibrant screens.
Exactly, those vibrant, power-efficient displays that just made images pop, and that they consistently offered better battery life, too.
Right.
That gave them a really tangible lead over many competitors early on.
And the results, well, they speak for themselves. By the fourth quarter of 2013, Samsung had actually overtaken Apple in global smartphone market share.
Yeah, the volume was huge.
They sold a staggering 83 million units. Apple sold 50 million that same period. That's a massive lead in just sheer volume.
But this leads us to a really fascinating nuance, doesn't it? Is global market share, just units shipped, is that always the best measure of success or profitability?
Good point.
Because while Samsung was, dominating globally in volume, Apple, for its part, kept its incredible stronghold in the U.S. market.
Right.
And that market, historically, just offers higher margins and builds much stronger user loyalty.
Okay.
So you could say Samsung was winning the volume game, but Apple was arguably winning the value game.
That's a really insightful distinction, volume versus value. And it makes you wonder, were people debating this back then? The long-term value of global volume versus that high-margin loyalty?
Oh, for sure. It was a constant discussion.
Because it seems Samsung hit its global peak, like 33% market share in 2014. But then that incredible momentum just started to flatten out.
Yeah, it plateaued.
Revenue growth slowed down a lot after 2013, even though sales were still increasing. And critically, their profits got really volatile. It wasn't a continued climb. It was more like hitting a ceiling.
And a key insight here is how that flattening happened right around the time we saw this explosive rise of new competition.
Okay.
Particularly from these really aggressive Chinese brands like Huawei and Xiaomi.
Right, I remember that shift.
These companies didn't just, enter the market. They completely changed the game on pricing and distribution.
How so?
They started offering comparable features, things like fingerprint sensors, 4K video, stuff that was premium.
Yeah.
But they offered it at literally half the price of Samsung's phones.
Half the price.
It
Wow.
was a total paradigm shift.
That sounds like a completely new playbook for the industry. How did giants like Samsung even start to respond to that?
It was tough.
I mean, Xiaomi, for instance, they pioneered that direct-to-consumer model, right? Flash sales, online only.
Exactly. Which drastically undercuts Samsung's traditional retail model. The expensive stores, the big distribution networks. It basically forced every established brand to completely rethink their whole business strategy. It made them incredibly vulnerable.
So external competition was a huge factor.
Definitely. But another major contributor to Samsung's plateau was actually internal. It was their own product line strategy.
Okay, so moving past the rise and these external challenges, what was going on inside Samsung that added to this shift? Their own products.
Yeah, their product strategy.
Because looking back as a consumer, Samsung's approach felt like, let's try to make a phone for absolutely everyone.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
But it led to this, almost bewildering number of overlapping product lines. You had the Galaxy S, the A, M, J, F, the Z Fold, Z Flip.
Too many, yeah.
I can totally relate. I remember trying to help my cousin pick a Samsung phone and feeling like I needed a PhD just to tell the models apart.
Yeah, it created massive confusion.
It really did.
And you contrast that with Apple's strategy, which was remarkably clear.
Yeah.
Very tiered.
Right.
You had the standard iPhone, the Plus, the Pro, Pro Max, minimal overlap, a very clear value proposition for each one. It made the choice much simpler for the consumer.
And the consequence for Samsung then was pretty significant, I imagine.
Oh, yeah.
This brand dilution, where you have too many similar products muddying the waters, it really seemed to hinder them, especially in that crucial U.S. market where, emotional factors and subconscious stuff often drives purchases.
Exactly.
If you can't easily tell the difference, why would you pay a premium? It raises that question. How much choice is actually too much choice?
It's the classic paradox of choice, right?
Yeah.
Like walking into a giant cereal aisle, sometimes too many options just paralyze you, or you just grab the same old thing.
Or you just walk away.
Or walk away. That's kind of what happened with Samsung's lineup for many people. And this ties directly into something Nokia's ex-CEO famously said. He said, "The battle of devices has become a war of ecosystems." And boy, has that proven true.
Wow, yeah.
And that became a key battle that Samsung ultimately really struggled to win.
And Apple's ecosystem is legendary for being so sticky, isn't it?
Incredibly sticky.
You think about iCloud, the App Store, AirPods, Apple TV, Apple Pay, MacBooks. It all just weaves together into this super interconnected, seamless environment. Once you're in, people rarely leave. It feels like it's designed to keep you integrated, make switching almost too difficult to bother with.
And Samsung certainly tried to replicate this. They launched their own wearables, their own software platform.
Right, they had their own watches and things.
Exactly. But often it felt either like third-party stuff cobbled together or just disconnected. So the result was, a collection of excellent individual products, but not really a unified, seamless, deeply integrated ecosystem.
Okay.
If you zoom out, the bigger picture is that the devices themselves are just the entry points, right? The real value, the thing that keeps customers, real retention, lies in that complete user experience that just keeps you inside that digital world.
Yeah, and it's interesting how much of that stickiness is genuinely about superior tech versus just the sheer convenience of habit,
That's a great point.
Apple keeps users through that deep integration and familiarity. Everything just kind of works together without you thinking about it. Seamless. Samsung, on the other hand, just didn't seem to have that same gravitational pull for long-term loyalty.
Right.
Which made it much easier for their customers to, jump ship if something else caught their eye.
And that lack of stickiness, combined with all the other factors we've talked about, the competition, the product confusion, it fundamentally reshaped their market reality today.
Yeah.
By 2022, Samsung's global market share had definitively dropped below Apple's.
And we also need to consider the bigger market context here, right? The whole global smartphone market itself is actually shrinking.
Yeah, it's huge. It's matured, saturated.
Sales have been declining year over year, down like 9% in 2022, another 4% in 2023.
Fewer first-time buyers, people holding on to phones longer.
Right, and even Apple's market share is slipping in some places, like China, where they dropped to third place in 2024.
True.
But, and this is crucial, Apple is offsetting those hardware losses in this massive way through its booming services division.
Ah, the services engine.
Exactly. Which boasts these incredible profit margins, sometimes up to like 73%.
Which is just staggering. It changes the whole financial picture for them. It's also worth pointing out the beaming used phone market.
Oh, right. Refurbished phones.
Yeah, which is now largely dominated by Apple and Samsung devices. And while, sure, it's a new revenue stream for them,
Okay.
it's also kind of a double-edged sword. It creates this new, incredibly competitive channel for consumers that directly eats into new device sales.
Yeah, competing with your past self, in a way.
Exactly.
So when you look at Samsung's current spot, they really are being squeezed from both ends, aren't they?
It seems that way.
You've got Apple dominating the high-margin premium markets, and then you've got Xiaomi and these other aggressive brands hammering them in the budget and mid-range segments.
It's a really tough position to be in strategically.
So, wrapping this up, what does this all mean for you, the listener, as you watch different markets and industries?
Samsung's journey, it really distills some core lessons, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
It highlights the profound importance of strategic patience, knowing when not to react immediately, the critical difference between just selling a lot globally versus actually being profitable and building loyalty,
Key distinction.
the sort of hidden dangers of confusing your customers with too many choices.
Absolutely.
And of course, the undeniable, almost gravitational power of a truly cohesive, integrated ecosystem that keeps users locked in.
And the really crucial shift we've seen, the big takeaway perhaps, is that the smartphone battle moved way beyond just hardware specs a long time ago.
It's now fundamentally a war for user loyalty. And that's won through integrated services and these seamless experiences. So the question, I think, for any business leader listening is, what seemingly minor factor today might actually become the decisive battleground for market dominance tomorrow?
That's a great question to ponder, and maybe next time you pick up your phone, just consider for a second. Are you just buying a device? Or are you actually stepping into an entire world and ecosystem that's been carefully designed to keep you right there?